Fed up New Yorkers are taken to TikTok to lament rat-infested apartments and ridiculous rent hikes that are making living in the city impossible. This one says, my $2,600 a month Manhattan loft tour. Rent increased to $3,200. I'm out. Original price $3,900. New rental $5,485. So this is crazy because, the average person living here don't make any money like that. I mean, these numbers here, like money, like wages before taxes. So you have to wonder what kind of work these people are doing, that they could be stupid enough to pay that much money in rent, unless you're really rich. So you gotta ask yourself, why are you paying that much money in rent just to live in Manhattan? I remember when I was early 20s, I used to be going over to Manhattan, hanging out with people there, like Lower East Side and so forth, which isn't that far from me. A lot of people live like in the projects, like Avenue D, the Smith Projects, the Velatics, down there by Jackson Street and so forth. Back in those days, even some of the people who live in the regular private building, the rent was reasonable. Now these places, like, the rent is so outrageous. It's like, why? Why? Even right now, we see what's going on at Jacob Rees houses over there between Avenue D and FDR Drive, where they have like arsenic in the water. Yeah. I remember people from over there. Jacob Rees houses. I remember a lady I used to chat with by the name of Crystal. She used to work at Gouverneur. And then over there you have the Lillian Ward houses, right down there by Houston Street. And then you have also like the LaGuardia houses. There are a whole bunch of them down there. These are not expensive buildings at all. So it's like, wow, these people living there, and some of them not that far from these people in the projects, and they're paying these outrageous rent. So New Yorkers are lamenting new rent prices on apartments they say they can no longer afford. The median Manhattan rent hit a record $4,100 in June, pricing out many who got a COVID discount. NYC TikTokers are documenting that even their rat and cockroach-infested rentals are getting major price hike. Imagine that, paying a lot of money and you have rats and cockroaches running. TikTok apartment tours took a dark turn in the summer of 2022 as COVID discounts expire. Rent discounts given by desperate landlords hoping to keep tenants amid the pandemic. Significant rent hikes are taking their place, according to real estate site Street Easy. Rentals that were listed during the peak of the pandemic in 2020 and 2021 are seeing an average increase of around 20% in asking price this year. In June, the median rent in Manhattan topped $4,000 per month, breaking previous records along with every other borough in the city aside from Staten Island. Displaced renters who once clinched pandemic deals are now responsible for more than 40% of Manhattan's vacancies in what's been heralded as the most challenging rental market in years. Outrageous price hikes have left many New Yorkers unable to afford to stay in the city, and many have taken to TikTok to lament their untenable rent increases. Well, first of all, these people are not really New Yorkers, because if you're really from here, you're not really going to pay that outrageous rent, you know? Nope. The people who pay that are like celebrities and so forth, like living in Tribeca, or living in hotels. Yeah, those people always have money. They can afford that. And poor people who live in certain parts of Manhattan. But the average person who lives here, go to work here, that's a lot of money to be paying in rent. If you have that much money, you could use that to save up and put a down payment and get a mortgage and, buy a house. Why are you going to spend all that money in rent? Just going to somebody else when you can invest it and build equity in a home. So, Nancy Wu, an economist and podcaster, shared that her landlord increased the monthly rent from $2,600 to $3,200, while Samantha Short, who works in music, business development at Facebook, showed off her studio apartment that's had its price raised from $2,400 to $3,938, and that's for a studio. That's a studio where everything is in there. Where you sleep, where you wash your dishes, everything in one room. At her lease renewal, Short said she's declining to renew. The indignity of post-pandemic price increases can be especially fraught when the apartment in question is rife with problems. Take TikToker Atrina Rossi, who documented the disparity between her Brooklyn apartment's living conditions, indoor flooding, trails of dead cockroaches and rats, and her landlord's planned $800 per month price hike. The latter is set to the tune of "It's What the Apartment's Worth," the soundtrack of another viral rent increase. Untenable rent increases have prompted many to decamp from the city or move back to their childhood homes. Yeah, what does that tell you? These people are not from here. Back to their childhood homes. In fact, more Americans are currently living in multi-generational households, largely because of financial issues, than they have in decades. Oh, that's good. Bring the family together. Back to mom and dad I go. TikToker Robbie Scott said in August 23rd, in an August 23rd parody response to a video on struggling 18 to 25-year-olds. So, there goes my dream of independence that I've been waiting for 23 effing years. I just want my own space. I don't want to be sleeping in the same bed I was sleeping in at the age of 7. But it's important to note that returning home is a safety net unavailable to many currently priced out of the New York rental market. Last week, more than 54,000 people were staying in New York City shelters. Yeah, according to city limits. That's 54,000 people. And we have people coming in from Texas. The governor of Texas is busing people who crossed over the border, who claiming asylum. And that seems to be non-stop. That's going on. Sending these people in buses, traveling like 3 days. I have a niece who lives in Dallas, One time she took the bus from Dallas to New York, Port Authority. She told me it took like 3 days. She said she will never do that again. So you can just imagine these people, after all they went through, coming like from South America, going through the jungles in Panama. That's a long trek. And then you get on a bus coming to New York for like 3 days. That's no joke. Just traveling in a bus, for example, going from New York City to Toronto, Canada, was a lot for me. Just doing that on a bus, because I did that like once before when I went up to Toronto. That was really something. The problem, experts say, is one of supply and demand. More people looking for a home in New York than there are affordable homes to rent, and prices of the existing housing supply are increasing in response. The housing shortage is national, but in New York specifically, officials say housing hasn't kept pace with job growth, and for reasons that range from zoning restrictions to supply chain struggles and political logjams. Construction has also lagged in comparison to other American cities. Early this summer, Evan Rugen, the founder of real estate investment from LVL Group, New York, went viral for a June 5th TikTok explaining a political loophole originally created to protect tenants. The Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019 prevents landlords from automatically increasing the price of rent-controlled apartments when a tenant leaves. But, according to Rugen, many landlords would prefer to keep those apartments empty and keep affordable units off the market, with the idea that the 2019 Act will soon be repealed. Really? I'm usually a pretty optimistic person. Vicky L. Bean, a former deputy mayor for housing and economic development, who supports efforts to build housing, told the New York Times, I would describe myself as very concerned. Well, we learned one thing during the pandemic. We learned that a lot of these jobs that people do, many of them, can be done remotely. So, like the people in this article here, for example, the woman Wu, the other one, you don't have to be in New York. I remember one time I was offered a job. I was in New Jersey, and this was before we ever heard of a pandemic. And I said, well, because it was working with computer, and I said, well, can I just work, from home, remote? And the answer was, no, we need you to come into the office. So can you imagine me having to travel from New York to New Jersey to work? And my thing was, well, a lot of people come from New Jersey to work in the city here in New York. I'll be doing the reverse, If people find that the jobs are here, why should I be going to New Jersey to work? And then comes a pandemic, and we found out that what I said was correct. Because it's like, sure, if you have a computer and you have a high-speed internet, you can do the same job. So these people who doing these work, they don't really have to live in New York. Matter of fact, there's some people, I saw some articles where people live in other countries, like Thailand, some go to like Mexico, and so forth. And they work, and some of these countries are giving visas that you can work. No, you can live there and you can work for a while, maybe a year, 2 years, and so forth. Yeah, and the term they use is digital nomad. A nomad, of course, comes from the word mean to wander around. A person who wanders around with no specific place. So a digital nomad. So if you're a digital nomad and you could do the job, you can be living in luxury. Like there's some nice places in Bali, Indonesia, resort areas. The money you can spend, the money these people paying in Manhattan, you can be living, I guess, near the seaside with huge rooms. You can have a maid, you can have service like that, which you can never afford in New York for that kind of money, and you still could be doing your work for the company. So this whole idea that you need to be in New York, well, you can always visit New York if you want to see like museums or so forth. You want to see a Broadway show, you can come visit, but you don't have to live here. you know, you don't have to live here and pay those outrageous rent. You can be a digital nomad. You can go down, even Costa Rica. I was in Costa Rica last year. Yeah, around, I think it was June 2021. And a number of people down there, digital nomad. And I think they're increasing the visa time too, that people could go there to work. They can work on a computer and they can live in Costa Rica. Only thing, Costa Rica is not one of those cheap countries compared to other countries like Honduras or Salvador and so forth. It's a little more expensive. But these people should just leave, that's all, and let these apartments be empty. And then, like this article mentioned here, about the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019, and how some people leave their apartment empty. Yeah, they're not earning any money, but they leave. So what's the point of that? They'd rather leave their apartment empty, hoping that the law would change. Well, you know what? The laws don't usually change like that. For that law to change, and I think this will be like a state law. This will be out of Albany, New York, the state government. That's not going to change like that. I don't think it's the city of New York that may. I got to do some research in this, but I don't think the city of New York did this law, and to change this, that's going to take a while. Okay, so that's a New York State statute. Introduced major change. So, once you see New York State, very hard to get anything changed like that from Albany, New York, because you're dealing with the state legislature, and it's a bicameral body. You have the assemblymen and the senators. Then you have the governor. So, this person is just dreaming, thinking that it's going to change. No, it's not going to change.